Hi everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. I'm Emily.
Hello.
Today we're tackling something pretty significant and definitely emotionally charged.
hmm
It's these recent decisions, the bans on transgender women participating in women's football.
Yes, it's certainly making waves.
Big waves. It really brings up fundamental questions, doesn't it? About fairness, inclusion, what a level playing field even means anymore.
Absolutely. It gets right to the heart of how we understand identity, biology, and participation in sport.
And thank you for watching Westferry Times. To help us, navigate this really complex area, we're joined today by Dr. Daniel Harris. He's a leading expert in sports policy, a sociologist specializing in gender and inclusion in sports. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. It's a really important conversation to be having.
Definitely. Okay, so let's try and unpack this. We've seen these announcements from governing bodies like the FA. Can you give us the core of what's actually been decided?
Certainly. The main development is that these bodies have implemented bans. They prevent transgender women from competing in women's football leagues under their jurisdiction.
And the reason they give.
The primary rationale stated is ensuring fair competition. There's a concern voiced that individuals who went through male puberty might retain certain physical advantages,
Even after transitioning.
even after medical transition, yes.
Hmm.
Advantages that, they argue, could unfairly impact the competitive balance in women's games.
Okay, and just so we're clear, for everyone listening, this isn't a blanket ban on all transgender people in football, is it?
No, that's a crucial point. The focus is specifically on transgender women and primarily those who transition after puberty.
Right.
The whole debate really hinges on the potential physiological effects of male puberty and whether they persist in a way that impacts sports performance significantly.
Got it. Now, predictably, this hasn't gone down quietly. There's been significant backlash, hasn't there?
Oh, absolutely. A very strong opposition.
What are the main arguments from those who disagree with these bans?
Well, the central argument is one of discrimination. Plain and simple.
Discrimination against transgender women.
Yes. Critics argue these policies deny transgender women a fundamental right,
Mm.
the right to participate in sport. They really emphasize inclusion as the paramount principle here.
And the positive role sport can play.
Exactly. Transgender activists and allies often highlight how empowering sport can be, and conversely, how damaging exclusion is. They see these bans as, well, an affront to dignity.
But the governing bodies, they push back on that, right? They maintain their stances about protecting women's sport.
They do. Their counterargument consistently comes back to fairness and the integrity of the women's category.
Integrity in terms of competitive balance.
Yes, they maintain that the physiological differences, as they see them, between cisgender women and transgender women who've undergone male puberty are significant enough to warrant these restrictions.
So they're saying it's not about exclusion for its own sake, but about the nature of the competition itself.
That's the position they put forward. And they often point towards scientific research or interpretations of it, suggesting some physical advantages might persist even after hormone therapy.
Which brings us right to the science. It seems like that's really at the heart of this disagreement. Can you break that down for us? What are we actually talking about biologically?
Okay, yeah, so the science discussion mainly revolves around sex hormones, particularly testosterone.
Right.
Testosterone plays a huge role in developing things like muscle mass, strength, endurance, key factors in most sports.
And there are typical differences between males and females.
Generally, yes. Cisgender men, meaning men whose gender identity aligns with the sex they were assigned at birth, typically have much higher levels of testosterone than cisgender women.
Yeah.
This contributes to observable average physiological differences.
So what happens hormonally when a transgender woman transitions medically?
Typically, the process involved hormone therapy. That means suppressing testosterone and introducing estrogen. And this definitely has effects. It leads to reductions in muscle mass and strength, changes in body fat distribution, and so on.
But the argument is that's not the whole story.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really contentious. Some research and interpretations of it suggest that certain physical attributes develop during male puberty. Things like perhaps bone density, skeletal structure, maybe certain aspects of lung capacity or cardiovascular development
Things that don't fully revert.
might not fully revert to the levels typically seen in cisgender women, even after years of hormone therapy. That's the concern.
So it's not just about current hormone levels, but the legacy, if you like, of male puberty.
Precisely. The worry from the governing body's perspective is that this developmental history might confer enduring physical differences that create an unfair competitive advantage.
But is the science settled on this?
Oh, definitely not. That's crucial. It's a really evolving area of scientific inquiry, and the degree of any retained advantage and how much it actually impacts performance in a specific sport likely varies hugely between individuals.
Depends on the person, when they transition, how long they've been on hormones?
Their training. The sport itself, some sports rely more on strength, others on endurance or skill. So applying a single rule across the board is inherently difficult. The science is complex, it's developing, and frankly, it's often interpreted through the lens of pre-existing beliefs about fairness and gender.
Which leads us straight into the ethics. This ethical tightrope walk, as you called it earlier, balancing participation rights with fair competition. How do you see that fundamental conflict?
It is a profound ethical dilemma, truly. On one side, you have the principle of inclusion, the right of every individual, including transgender women, to participate in activities like sport, which are important for health, well-being, community.
Belonging.
Belonging, exactly. Denying that can be deeply harmful.
But on the other side,
On the other side, you have the concept of fair competition, which is also fundamental to the idea of sport, especially elite sport. If one group is perceived to have, or actually does have, a significant inherent physical advantage over another within a protected category,
like the women's category,
then the argument goes the competition itself might cease to be meaningful or fair. Some argue that fairness is the absolute bedrock. Without it, the competition loses its integrity.
it's tough. Have other major sports bodies grappled with this? What have they tried?
Yes, absolutely. Different sports have tried different things. You mentioned the IOC, the International Olympic Committee.
Right.
For a while, their approach involved setting specific testosterone level thresholds. The idea was that if a transgender woman maintained her testosterone below a certain level for a set period,
Say 12 months.
then that might mitigate any unfair advantage.
Did that work? Was it accepted?
It was, and remains, highly debated. Some argued testosterone level alone is too simplistic, that it doesn't account for those potential retained advantages from puberty we discussed.
Like bone structure.
Exactly. So the IOC has actually moved away from that universal approach recently, suggesting guidelines should be more sports-specific. It just highlights how difficult it is to find one single rule that everyone agrees on and that fits every situation.
Looking forward then, what do you see as the potential consequences of these bans in women's football, both for the sport and for the individuals involved?
Well, the immediate impact is clear. Exclusion. Transgender women who are playing or hoping to play are now barred in these leagues.
Which must have a huge personal cost.
Undoubtedly.
Hmm.
Psychologically, socially. It can lead to feelings of marginalization, rejection. It's significant.
And longer term for the sport.
Longer term, it's harder to say. We might see a greater push towards creating perhaps separate or different kinds of pathways, maybe specific leagues or competitions for transgender athletes.
Is that feasible?
Or desirable. That comes with its own massive set of challenges. Questions about viability, resources, potential segregation. It's not a simple fix either. Really, this whole issue is forcing a much bigger conversation about gender categories in sport altogether.
About how we define them, who gets to be in them.
Precisely. And whether the traditional binary model works for everyone in the 21st century.
Is there a potential middle ground, do you think? Some way to navigate this that isn't just bans?
I think many hope so. Perhaps more flexible approaches, maybe combining certain criteria hormone levels, plus maybe some sport-specific performance assessments, though that's also complex.
And very difficult to implement fairly.
Very. Or perhaps different rules for different levels of competition, community versus elite. The crucial thing, I believe, is the need for continued, respectful dialogue.
Listening to everyone involved.
Especially listening to transgender athletes themselves. Their voices, their experiences have to be central. And we need continued high-quality research. But finding a solution that satisfies everyone on fairness and inclusion, that's the immense challenge.
This has been incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for breaking down such a complex and clearly very sensitive issue for us. Your expertise has been invaluable.
Thank you. It's, as I said, a vital conversation and one that's far from over.
It really is. And thank you all for joining us for this deep dive. It's clear there are no easy answers here, just ongoing questions about how we balance deeply held values. We hope solutions can be found that respect everyone involved.
Finding that balance is key.
If you found this discussion helpful or thought-provoking, please do subscribe to Westferry Times and maybe share it with someone else who's grappling with these questions.
It certainly prompts reflection on what we value most in sport, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And maybe that's the final thought for you, our listener. Given everything we've discussed, how can we as a society work towards creating sporting environments that manage to be both truly fair and genuinely inclusive for absolutely everyone, considering the complexities of biology, identity, and competition?
A question for us all to ponder.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks again for tuning in to the deep dive. Until next time.